Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
Holy moly, we got severe weather. We got severe thunderstorms. There's tornadoes in the Arrowhead. Mass hysteria. Oh, what are we going to do? Podcast.
Same thing we always do.
Yep. So if suddenly the feed stops, it means one of two things. Either I've lost power or Cory's detached housing is on its way to Oz. And this time, try to record, get a decent recording with one of the main characters. You know, could be Scarecrow, could be the witch, Galinda's. I mean, you know, just if you're going to Oz, you know you can get home. Because from Oz, you can get to the DC Animal where Captain Carrot lives. From there, you know you can get to Earth 1. From Earth 1, you know you can get to Earth Prime. That's assuming we are Earth Prime. If not, you can cross over into Earth 616, and from there probably get to our universe. Just find Gwenpool, and she can help you out. So either way, Cory will be back for next week's podcast if he gets blown away, which is nice.
I'm not seeing any storms near us.
No,
the sun is out right now, by the way.
I don't have sun, but the way everything's moving, it's going south to north, and the worst stuff is north, and it's just exploded. So as that cold front slowly comes through, Joe, meteorologist here, that's where the direction's going. So you got to keep an eye on what's west and south. Though, like you said, the line could come through, and without the sun powering it, it could just, you know, we might get some rain. It says we're supposed to get rain all day tomorrow. But we could probably use it. So, no more 100-degree days, 3,000% humidity. We might actually have one regular day and then
fall.
What do you used to call it? Indian summer?
Yes.
Kind of like up into the 80s. Native American summer? Is that even PC now?
I don't know. I just know that I am starting to see some of the trees here in lovely Chaska. Their leaves are starting to turn yellow already.
Yeah.
But you did not tune in.
No.
For the weather report.
No.
You tuned in for funny books.
Yes. But not necessarily the funny books you're thinking of.
Last year, around this time, we did 2 episodes based on a book that we both love.
Yeah.
The Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide to Lost Universes.
Yeah, I even got the one that's autographed, because I'm that type of guy.
We made it all the way up to MLJ, which is Archie.
Mm-hmm.
And we can actually kind of sort of add one that it's later in the book, but they came back, and now it looks like that their coming back is over. Valiant has had all of their upcoming books removed from Diamond.
Those bastards.
Now, they put out a press release saying, we're not dead yet. But if you are a Valiant fan, I would not hold my breath for any new issues.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the reason that Valiant came back was that, hey, they had a venture capital company who said these characters are ripe for movies. And they made one, and it came out like the week before the entire country shut down for the pandemic. And since then, they went from putting out 8 to 10 books a month to 2 books a month and then 1 book a month. And now gone. Because I think recently they got bought by an investment company from Europe who probably looked and went, yeah, we're not investing in any more comics.
Yep, we're out of here.
See, I would play the sad music, but quite honestly, I don't think anybody's cared about Valiant for at least 4 or 5 years.
No. Although I did buy something. When one of my buddies was blowing stuff out, he sold me a run of Valiant books So if I ever get them coordinated, I'll read them.
I bought the jump drives that had all the
Good stuff.
all the first Valiant stuff, and then all the second Valiant stuff up to 2019.
Cool.
So if I ever want to read the rest of them, I'm pretty sure they'll be in quarter bins going forward. But let's grab the book, Joe, and we will hit Milestone Media.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read right from it. And if you have a copy of Lost Universe, we're on page 276. Milestone Media was formed by comic book industry veterans Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis Cohen, Michael Davis, and business executive Derek T. Dingle to increase minority representation in comic books. They had a unique deal through which their comics would be published by DC, with Milestone retaining full editorial control. They dubbed it, or somebody dubbed it, the Dakotaverse. The main action was set in the fictional Midwestern city of Dakota based on an extensive story Bible created by McDuffie with character designs by Cohen. Let's see, there was a precipitating an event for the arrival of most of the superpowered individuals. They called it the Big Bang, conflict between rival gangs in which the authorities intervened and used a dangerous gas to control the situation. The unintended consequences were many dead and some transformed. Survivors who manifested powers were called Bang Babies. They weren't always clear-cut good guys or bad guys. They started with 4 titles: Hardware, Icon, Bud Syndicate, and Static. Milestone, the Dakota Universe, was released as a card set by Skybox, which focused on characters and creators behind the company. Let's see what came later. They did a crossover event called Shadow War in 1994 with 2 new titles, Shadow Cabinet and Zombie, XOMBI. Later that year, Cobalt was rolled out as another new title. And they did have a crossover into the DC universe. Although I'm looking for, Worlds Collide. It was a 14-part crossover with the DC universe. Davis left Milestone in 95 to found Motown Machine Works, a comic book imprint published through Image Comics. Cohen would join him as editor-in-chief, with the comic market devastated by the spectacular boom and bust the mid-1990s. Milestone stopped publishing in 97. Static Shock, where some of you remember Static from, was a popular cartoon on Kids WB from 2000 to 2004. There was a 4-issue Static Shock Rebirth of the Cool in early 2001 to tie in, and in 2010, there's a 2-part Milestone Forever, which actually delivered something most Lost Universes fans never get, an actual conclusion before the characters were sort of merged into the DC universe for a while. Now,
they have since brought Milestone back for a series of mini-series that kind of, they don't erase everything that happened with the previous Milestone, but you don't need to have read the previous Milestone books to get what's going on. I have a special affinity for this.
Oh, yeah.
Dwayne McDuffie was on Genie, which was kind of a competitor to AOL and CompuServe. And he got the addresses of everybody who was interested and sent them out the first issues as photocopies, and then asked you to write in what you thought, let him know what worked, what didn't, etc., etc. And I really enjoyed most of the books. I thought Icon was fantastic. The idea of Icon was, what if Superman had landed in the South in the 1840s to a slave family? Static was a teenage superhero book that tried to evoke the Spider-Man idea. Hardware was very much a Iron Man type story. And Blood Syndicate was what if a street gang got superpowers. I always thought that that book was too crowded and had too many characters for it to really work for me. Zombie was fantastic. Zombie was an amazing book. And when they did the DC 52, New 52, they actually brought back Zombie with the original writer because the people at DC thought it was so much better than a book that was canceled so soon. I don't remember anything about Cobalt. And Shadow Cabinet was kind of the Milestone Avengers, where you had all the big characters together. I thought those the main three books that I liked, Icon, Hardware, and Static, were some of the best superhero books. The problem was they used this new coloring called Milestone 100. And it was, most comics were 4-color comics. This was very early computer coloring. So they said that they had access to 100 different colors. And a lot of the time, the color was just very garish and did not help the art at all. So I think that when some people would pick it up and flip through, it would be, this comic doesn't look all that good. There was also prejudice involved in the books not selling. I remember comic fans at the time, I don't want to buy a black comic book. And I think one of the problems they had was they marketed it as that rather than this is a new superhero universe or this is a multicultural superhero universe that has white, black, Asian, etc., etc., etc. I remember Spawn. While the lead character was black, they rarely, if ever, showed that. When they'd show his wife and child, they'd show it. But he was always in the cowl, and when he did have the cowl off, his face was just hamburger. But I think that there was some prejudice, even in the 90s, toward books like that.
Now, if you want to collect any of these, it should be fairly easy to find because most of the issues would be haunting your dollar bins. There are a few exceptions. If you want to get the Hardware #1 Platinum Edition, that's going to cost you a bit of money. And there was one other one. Let me find it here. Some of the trades are out of print. They might go for silly money.
You don't have to buy the back issue comics, though, Joe.
Well, I'm not finished yet because I have a question for you. And I got to find it here. Why is Static number 45 a $300 comic book?
Probably it's the last issue.
No. Well, it is, but there's another reason, too.
Oh, why is that?
Mobius did the cover.
Oh.
So you've got two things going for it. The other one that's expensive is that sometimes you'll find high prices on that Static miniseries, that Static Shock, because nobody bought it. And then Static became a bit of an underground hit. So that entire Static Shock Rebirth of the Cool, anywhere from $40 to $100, depending on if you can find it. Same thing with the trade. Now, you said,
you don't have to go digging through back issues, Joe.
Well, you're going to have to if you want that platinum cover.
Well, true, but you could just buy the Milestone Compendium, where there are 2 volumes so far and a third is coming out that reprint all of the all of the Milestone books in order, including the crossover, because they do have in the second volume Blood Syndicate 13 through 23, Hardware 13 through 21, Icon 11 through 21, Shadow Cabinet 1 through 4, Static 9 through 20, Steel 6 and 7, Superboy 6 and 7, Superman Man of Steel 35 and 36, and Worlds Collide #1. The third volume has been solicited. I don't know when it is coming out, though, because
I don't see anything
these
there.
things take forever.
Now, Milestone was supposed to return. they put it on Earth M. So if you ever want to look for it, because they announced in 2017 Milestone would be returning in 2018 with 5 titles, including Icon, Static, Duo, based on the character Zombie, 2 other titles, Earth M and Love Army. However, they forgot that Charlotte Fullerton, Dwayne McDuffie's widow, she inherited 50% share of the original Milestone Media Company. And she owned half of the original Milestone IPS. And she sued 2017 for being excluded from the revived company. They must have settled it because they did publish a Milestone Return number 0 in 2020. Although, other than the reprints you talked about, I haven't seen anything new.
Oh, we've had all kinds of new stuff.
Okay, I don't have the dates on it.
Pull it up here. Milestone.
Excuse me while he whips it out.
Yeah, it's been a series of mini-series. So lately, pulling it up here, we had the Milestone Initiative, which was a $3.99 double-sized comic that was all new creators. And that came out around Free Comic Book Day.
This year?
Yeah. And then
so they're
since
still
then,
trying to get something going.
Well, and now we have miniseries. So we've had, let's see here, Static Season 1, which was a 6-issue miniseries. Icon and Rocket Season 1, another 6-issue miniseries. Hardware Season 1, which was a 6-issue miniseries. Duo was a 6-issue miniseries. And Blood Syndicate was a 6-issue miniseries. We're also currently seeing Icon versus Hardware, which will be a 6-issue miniseries that is currently being printed. So they're instead of like relaunching all the books at once, they're just doing a series of miniseries.
And
so
do you know
it's
how
one
they're
book
selling?
a month. Well enough that they're going into trade paperbacks. We don't get a lot of sales data anymore, but they are doing trade paperbacks. I would imagine that out of all of them, Static is the best selling because Static is the one that people know because of the cartoon.
So if you want, you can always travel over to Earth M.
Next up is one that now, Joe, when you had a comic shop, you were selling Milestone.
More or less.
Other than me, did anyone buy them?
There were people that bought them. I mean, I had our good buddy Jerome Wanker who bought all DCs, and I put maybe 1 or 2 on the shelf. There might have been a little bump with the Worlds Collide crossover, but it was never anything nominal. I would probably sweep the shelves of any Milestone books, bring them to the con at half price just to move them out.
So next up is one that there are probably more stories about than any other of these dead universes.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel's New Universe.
Yep. Let's see. To celebrate the 25th anniversary of Marvel Comics, the company launched the new universe. Behind the scenes budgets were being axed. What readers saw was apparently a bit different from what they tried to do. The new universe was designed to be separate from the existing Marvel universe, provide a setting in which superheroes were previously non-existent, and events moved much closer to real time than in standard comics. Let's see, editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, creators Archie Goodwin, Elliot R. Brown, Mark Grunwald, Tom DeFalco, among others, developed the line's original 8 titles. In Shooter's words, the universe is simply deciding to use a universe unused in comics, our own. No repulsors, no unstable molecules. In fact, no fantasy or fantastic elements at all, except for the very few we introduce carefully. Does that make sense? You bet. Started with Starbrand number 1, where there was a white event, set the story in motions that led to the creation of humans with paranormal abilities. The Starbrand is a black star-shaped tattoo-like mark that provides infinite godlike powers to the person branded with the mark. In this case, Ken Connell of Pittsburgh. The original wielder of the Starbrand, known as the Old Man, transferred the power into Ken Connell. It became a bi-monthly book after Shooter left, and it was always, in my mind, he always talked about the Starbrand was a weapon in a far-off war that, as far as I know, they never really went to anywhere in the line. DP7, Displaced Paranormals, was tied for the New Universe's longest running title, 32 regular issues, 1 annual. Mark Grunwald, Paul Ryan were on it for the entire run. Colorist Paul Betcon. Let's see. Title featured 7 main characters that received paranormal abilities thanks to the White event. Cyforce also ran 32 issues, 1 annual. Seemed to be one of the more popular New Universe titles. Favorable reviews made it comparisons to the X-Men comics. The group was adolescents who developed sonic powers following the White event. This was Archie Goodwin, Walter Psionic. Thank you.
Yeah, Psionic.
Yep. Because I was looking forward to because it was Archie Goodwin and Walt Simonson that created it. Later on, Fabian
Niasasia.
And Ron Lim. And let's see, towards the end, Danny Fingeruth, Mark Texera, Bob Hall. The original lineup then included Kickers Inc., Mark Hazard, Merc of Justice. Not to spoil it, but he was the only one who died at the end of his book and never came back.
By the way, Mark Hazard, written by Peter David.
Yep, which is why I'm trying to pick it up. Spitfire and the Troubleshooters. And that ran 13 issues. Let's see. Kickers Inc., Mark Hazard, Night Mask, and Codename Spitfire were canceled at the 1-year mark. And let's see, May 1988. They started up again, increasing the cover prices, and I believe becoming direct market only.
Yes.
They continued events from Starbrand 12, where Ken was trying to get rid of the Starbrand and accidentally created the Pit by vaporizing Pittsburgh. This led to the draft, the war, because they thought, of course, the Soviets did it, and then, of course, the war itself. This actually marks one of the few lost universes to get a firm conclusion. Doesn't mean that people lost interest. And in fact, bits and pieces of it have come over into the Marvel Universe. And I started to read that list of where it was included, and it was like, that is very extensive, because Mark Grunwald had Quasar originally go over to the universe where Quasar got the Starbrand, not realizing what he had. I believe the Living Tribunal then quarantined the planet, but as we know, there's been various characters with names showing up. The Starbrand definitely had a large part to do with the Avenger. I think it was Hickman's run, wasn't it?
Yes.
Leading up to Star Wars. So there are pieces of it around. There are no books that have any real heat on any of these. I think, is it Spitfire and the Troubleshooters, which is Todd McFarlane's first comic work? So that one might have a little heat on it. My favorite of all of them had to have been the Starbrand, especially when John Byrne got a hold of it, because I liked John Byrne at the time, and it was obviously they weren't planning too much with it, because John Byrne kind of made it loop around itself, where if I recall it right, and again, I haven't read these things since like 1989, Ken became the Old Man who gave the Starbrand to himself and blah, blah, blah. I thought it was interesting. The Pit was probably one of my favorites, just because, again, they did something nobody else did. Let's just make a huge explosion. And while Ken, survived and realized what he did, I thought it was interesting the way through the other ones, the war and the draft, the rest of the universe that was alive dealt with this particular situation. They didn't realize it was an accident. They thought it was an act of war by the then Soviet Union. Most of the line, I didn't own a shop. I didn't buy them to resell because even though Pat and I were doing cons, I don't think anybody cared. I think I started reading all of them, but by issue 4 or 5, I probably dropped. And then I picked up again when John Byrne took over Star Brand. I followed the Pit. I followed the war, draft of the war. Pit I remember very vividly. The other two I don't. And I think in past I went back to pick up Mark Hazard merch. Wait, which was the one? Was that the one Peter David did?
Yep.
Yeah, I picked that up because Peter David could write the phone book, and I'd pick it up. What did you think of this line, Cory, as it was coming out?
Well, I want to talk about the behind-the-scenes stuff, what I thought at the time, and what I think now.
Okay.
So when they announced we're doing something big for the 25th anniversary, I don't know about you, but for me, by this time, the shine was completely off the Jim Shooter rose.
For me, it wasn't even an issue. It was just it wasn't Jim Shooter per se. Because again, I was very naive about creators, but it was like, oh, this could be interesting.
But he started building it up and building it up and building it up. And then he released what the new universe would be. All these new books are coming out at once. They won't have any fantasy elements except for the ones that we put in. And he talked about how, when the thing picks up a building, you don't see the pipes and the electrical and this, but in the new universe, you will. And the more he talked about it, the more I thought, so there's not going to be any fantastic elements. This is going to be as dull as rocks. And then the announcement, Kickers Inc., about a football team. And as the announcements came out, they underwhelmed. They all just sounded like something dull. And when the books came out, I remember I was at the comic shop when they came out, and I flipped through, and they didn't look good. They looked subpar. And there were so many other books. DC was in the middle of Crisis on Infinite Earths. First Comics was at their peak. Kamiko was coming out with stuff. All of these other companies were just knocking it out of the park. Here's Marvel's big celebration of their 25th anniversary, and it's a bunch of books that look as dull as dishwater. And you'd flip through, and it would be pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of talking heads. And it was, I'm not interested. I remember I picked up Mark Hazard Merc because Peter David was writing it, and he at least was doing action-adventure stories. But the rest of it just seemed dull. Since then, I have actually sat down and listened to Jim Shooter tell us his version of what happened with the new universe. I have heard other creators who worked on the new universe or worked at Marvel at the time give their version. And why we will never really know, because there wasn't a scribe who was taking all of it down. I tend to believe Peter Sanderson, who was working on he was kind of Marvel's official archivist. He was the one behind the official guide to the Marvel Universe. He did all the Marvel Saga stuff. He worked on all the indexes. He was at the Marvel office at the time. Jim Shooter's side of the story is that he pitched that they would make an outreach to creators who had left Marvel to come play in this new universe, to pitch ideas and sort of create kind of a side universe to the Marvel Universe. And Shooter said that he put Tom DeFalco in charge of it. Tom DeFalco, on the other hand, said, no, I was in Marvel editorial. He said, when you have spare time, could you work on this? And it was, well, Jim, I'm editing books and I'm writing. I don't have spare time. And he would tell that to Shooter over and over and over again, and Shooter just wouldn't listen. He said, you could work it in. It's not like the books you're editing need a lot of, blah, blah, blah. And that was when Tom DeFalco kind of was like, does he even know what we do here? So they had a certain budget, and then when the first deadline came for, here are the books we're going to put out, Shooter went to DeFalco and said, what do you got? And DeFalco said, I got nothing because I'm editing books and writing books. And he and Shooter got into a shouting match. And then when Shooter met with Marvel's president, James Galton, Galton said, all right, what are the books you're putting in this? And Jim said, well, we don't have them yet. We're still working on that. And I need to figure out who I'm going to assign, et cetera, et cetera. And Galton cut his budget. Because basically it's like you're doing this big new publishing initiative and or at the first deadline you don't have jack or squat. Cut his budget. So Shooter went back and kept stalling for time until Galton said, look, they need to come out in the summer because summer is when our biggest sales are. You need to get something on my desk so that I could approve it. That's why when you look at the early books, it's all people who were already on staff at Marvel or at Epic. A lot of editors and a lot of young artists who this was their first assignment or they'd only done fill-ins here and there because they didn't have a lot of budget. Nobody was pitching anything because it was, well, why would I want to pitch something that Marvel would own when I could pitch something to DC that's going to sell better because DC is about to do a big relaunch, or I could go to First or Comico or Eclipse or somebody else and own it. That's why you had Archie Goodman and Fabian Nicieza, who came over from the sales department, and Peter David, who was still working in the sales department, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Shooter was able to kind of twist some arms and get John Romita Jr. to draw his book. But if you look, there are no, quote, name talents on any of these books because it was all cobbled together last minute. It came out and laid a huge goose egg. The sales on the first issues were strong because all Marvel first issues were strong. But by the fifth or sixth issue, they knew they had a turkey. Shooter was already in trouble for how he treated people in editorial. He was notorious for his shouting matches, notorious for his micromanagement. And Marvel was trying to sell to New World Pictures. And when New World Pictures came in, they started asking around, and morale at Marvel was in the toilet. So once the sale was done, Shooter was booted. Most of the books had a 12-issue contract with the creators. So when they got to their 12th issue, that's why so many of them only lasted 12 issues. The people who worked on them had a 12-issue contract, and at the end of the contract, they said, yeah, we're not going to do any more of this. The books that kept going were, I believe it was Justice was still selling, and they turned that into Judge Dredd. DP7 was still selling. Cyforce was still selling. And one thing they did that, to me, always strikes me as the biggest kick in the teeth any comic company and creators ever did to anyone they fired. They put John Byrne on Starbrand. Now, Shooter had said in interviews that he was writing Starbrand because the character was based on him. So immediately John Byrne had him do something stupid that killed Jim Shooter's hometown. And that's why the lead character on Starbrand for the rest of that series was just beat to hell by the story because it was Jim Shooter, it was John Byrne taking out all his anger against Shooter. They tried thought that, okay, the books we have, maybe we could build them up by making them a little more superhero oriented. But by then there was just so much stink on them. The Pit was supposed to be kind of a reset. It didn't help. They did the Draft, which was a one-shot gearing up for a big crossover. Then they did the War, and after the War, it was over because it was one of those things where it's just not selling. We're doing these prestige format books. They're not selling. Nobody cares. And the new universe...
Not that they wouldn't revisit it.
Well, what it is, Mark Grunwald, he loved the idea that there was another universe, so he started playing with it, which is what he does. He then did the worst crossover in Marvel history.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about in 2006.
No. We need to go to 1994. Star Blast.
Oh, you're talking Star Blast, yeah.
The worst crossover in history. I did a special podcast on it a while back. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. See,
Mark Grunwald had to put out he didn't put out a press release, but he kind of put out a thing to people saying, okay, here's what happened.
See, and this is where, if you really want to see post-New Universe appearances, go to page 345 of the book, and they have quite literally every appearance of everybody and all the trades that they're in. But they did, like I said before, they did revisit, or tried to, because no concept except Ultraverse gets left on the floor. In 2006, 20 years after Universe was dead, Marvel tested the waters with a series of 5 one-shots and 3 short stories rolled into Untold Tales of the New Universe. I never bothered. The short stories had Kickers Inc., which appeared in New Avengers 16, Arc Hazard, Merc, and Amazing Fantasy 18, Spitfire, and Amazing Fantasy 19. They also did 5 one-shot titles under the same Untold Tales. All the tales take place before the Black Event, or the destruction of Pittsburgh, as they call it. And then in 2007, with writer Warren Ellis, they came up with New Universal, which consisted of Universals 1 through 6 and a bunch of other one-shots. I did not read any of these.
Ready for the fun part of New Universal?
Yeah.
As you see, it was a 6-issue series. It was supposed to be a 12-issue series. All the notes Warren Ellis had for issues 7 through 12 were on a hard drive that crashed.
Huh.
And it's one of those where there's a lot of stuff that Warren Ellis just quit doing at that time because all the writing he'd been doing was on a hard drive that crashed and he had no backups. And Marvel did not say, well, why don't you just, we'll give you time, figure out what you want to do. It was, no, it's good. We're good. We're fine. Now,
after New Universal 6, they just came out with 4 one-shots the following year.
But then as part of the Jonathan Hickman Avengers story, because that story was about all the different universes sort of bashing into each other, he brought back the New Universe and used the Star brand in the Marvel Universe as a very different idea from what it had been in the New Universe. And we had a Star brand in the Marvel Universe, which is basically this thing that shows up that's manifested by that universe to try to save the universe when it's at its biggest peril. So that's why you had Starbrand and Nightmask going into Secret Wars, and then coming out of it, they did a mini series, and I actually really liked. I thought it was a lot of fun because the Starbrand had been put on this college kid who was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and Nightmask was kind of his guide. But it did not last. as they don't. They do show that the characters have shown up here and there, usually when it's a multiverse story. And you can say a lot of things about New Universe, but the biggest thing that I will remember from it is that was the final nail in Jim Shooter's coffin as editor-in-chief of Marvel.
He's dead, Jim.
He went on to say, Shooter is very well known for making himself the hero of every story. But in this case, it was very much he was trying to pass off this job onto somebody else, and the other people were like, no, I'm not doing this. No, you got it. DeFalco even said if he would have given me a bump in pay to work on it as overtime, would have been happy to. But I already had a full plate. And he was out in the press and in the office talking about how this was his great idea. Well, if it's your great idea, Jim, you should do it. And it's very clear that Jim Galton didn't believe Shooter's story that Tom DeFalco screwed it up, because who was the editor-in-chief after Jim Shooter?
Well, it wasn't John Byrne.
No, it was Tom DeFalco.
Yeah.
So there is the story of the New Universe. Even when I go back and read these, even the ones that people liked, like DP7 and Cyforce, I find them unrelentingly dull. It's people standing around and talking, drawn by... Now, there are comic creators who can do that. There are artists who can make that interesting. But if you got, somebody who this is their third or fourth comic, and you give them a script that's 22 pages of people standing around and talking, they don't know how to make that interesting. And New Universe proves it. Dull.
Now, the next universe up, I know very little of, because the books are insanely expensive if you can find them. And this is the Thunder Agents from Tower Comics. Published initially in an era of high-tech espionage, think James Bond. There were a superhero comic book revival. It was in full swing. And Len Brown and Wally Wood developed Thunder Agents for Tower Comics. Thunder stood for the Higher United Nations Defense Enforcement Reserves, which was a springboard for all the adventures. There was no problem attracting talent. They got, Larry Ivy, Reed Crandall, Gil Kane, George Tuska, Mike Esposito, Dick Atkins, Dick Ayers, Orlando, Steve Ditko, just, the low-level people, and there's a whole list of people. Debuted in 1965, Thunder Agents #1. It was 25 cents, where most comics were 12 cents, but it was 64 pages, where other comics were 32. There were multiple stories showing individual teams, then the team as a whole. In the original twist, not only did the powers come from scientific devices, but the technology took a physical and mental toll on the agents who used it. Another change of pace came via the characters of John Janus, Mentor, whose mental powers come from the Mentor helmet. Janus was actually a double agent working for the Warlord, who were Thunder's foe. However, he turns to the side of good before eventually dying permanently in Thunder Agent 7. A very rare event for comics at the time. And of course, staying dead continues to be a rarity to this day. The most interesting thing I find about the Thunder Agents, and I believe, Cory, we've talked about it before, for some reason, they're public domain.
Well, some people think they're public domain, but it's messy.
Well, JC Comics, Texas Comics, Deluxe Comics, Solson, Penthouse Comics, DC Comics, IDW Publishing, they've all done either one and done books or added material to the Legends or done series. DC actually collected the Thunder Agent archives, which is probably the best, followed by Deluxe's talented back Wally Wood's Thunder Agent series. So, yeah, like you said, it's messy.
Well, I could go into it here. First off, I have read all of the Thunder Agents. I bought the archives, and then when I first discovered direct sales, there was, oh, look, it's the Thunder Agents. I remember this. And they had really cool covers. I think when JC Comics published them, they had a Sternenko cover. Wally Wood's Thunder Agents from Deluxe. George Perez was the main artist. The reason it came out was Wally Wood got a job at Marvel, and Stan was like, great, I'm going to put you on Daredevil. And Wally Wood could not hate the Marvel method more. Could not hate it more. So he asked if he could write and draw, Daredevil. And he did a couple issues, but Stan did not care for what he had done. So I think on one of them, Stan rewrote most of the dialogue. And Wally was kind of upset about that, said that Stan was taking credit for stuff he had done, and quit. He knew Len Brown, and they put together a pitch and went to Tower Comics, and Tower Comics said, sure. The reason they did it as Thunder Agents rather than a superhero team was because this was the middle of the big spy boom. And they were able to get people, because it was more of an anthology than a regular book. That's how they were able to get people like Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson and Reed Crandall to do it. But Wally Wood did most of the art on the main story. They had the main Thunder Agents books. Dynamo got his own book. No Man, who is a fascinating character, got his own book. No Man was kind of he was a robot with a human personality, and when one of the robot bodies would die, the personality would shift over to a new robot body. Dynamo was supposed to be kind of the big character. If you look at his character, he is drawn in primary colors. Strong guy, tears stuff up. If you look on the Thunder Agents comic, he is usually the character in the middle. They did a few issues of Undersea Agent, which oddly enough lasted the longest of all the solo books. I would have thought it would have been Dynamo. Then they went under, and here's where it gets super, super messy. John Calabano says that he bought the rights. Did he buy them from Tower Comics? No, he bought them from a third party. So he went to JC Comics and they published it, and I think he was trying to put a deal together with Archie, and Archie was looking into it because their Red Circle stuff, I think they did one issue, either one or two issues through him. But then you had Dave Singer, who believed that it was public domain because he looked at the original comics and they had not put a copyright notice in them. So he believed them to be public domain. And there is nothing known about Dave Singer. But those early issues, the talent on those, you had Roy Thomas, Jerry Ordway, George Perez, Dave Cockrum, Keith Giffen at his peak. And they put out a few issues, and then the money ran out, and John Calabano sued. So they put out another issue that just looked like crap. And Dave Singer, no one really knows if they settled out of court or if Dave Singer just went away. So you didn't get any more Thunder Agents for a while. DC actually picked up the rights. I know that Penthouse Comics paid Calabano for the rights. DC paid him for the rights, and in their Thunder Agents archives, they even have the Dave Singer comics in there. Then they tried to publish a series that didn't sell. It went over to IDW. They tried to publish a series that didn't sell. Thunder Agents is one of those things that has been floating around. Now, if you look out on the interwebs, there are two groups of people. There are people who say the Thunder Agents is public domain, and they are moving forward with doing Thunder Agents stuff. There are other people who say, no, it is not public domain, and they are going to sue the public domain people if anything ever gets published. I don't know if it will ever be ironed out, because with Tower Comics going under and no copyright on the books themselves, and John Calabano's claim never having been tested in court, it's just, we don't know. I know that Guandanaland has not published them because they don't want to step in that mess. And everybody who's published them after Dave Singer went away has basically licensed them from Calabano, who I think passed away. So it's his estate they license it from now. But the book has never sold well enough for someone to say, I am willing to fight this in court. Those archives are fantastic. You've got some amazing work from Wally Wood at his peak. You've got Gil Kane coming off Green Lantern before he went to Marvel. Ogden Whitney, who I've talked about a lot, wrote stories. Wally Wood wrote stories. They're excellent. They're excellent superhero comics. They're excellent superhero comics. But Tower published very little. They published the Thunder Agent stuff. They did a few teen humor books, and then they went away. And not much is known about them other than that. And there we go.
Archives are not terribly expensive on the YouTubes, or eBays, I should say. So if you're prone to want to pick them up, how many did they do? I see
6.
5, 6.
It's 6.
Okay, let me just put in number 6, because usually there's 1 or 2 that are not terribly expensive, $35. You know, they were what originally, 50, 60?
They were 50.
And they go up too. So, you know, keep an eye if you're looking for one sealed, or you'll be happy with a reader copy. You could probably get a little cheaper. The final one we'll talk about. Oh, go ahead.
Well, we're at an hour, Joe.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll leave it there, and we can, go on to other universes that definitely aren't lost, like these guys, our sponsors.
Our newest sponsor is NordVPN. Let's be honest, if you're out on the internet, you need a VPN to protect you. There's all sorts of things going on the internet where people can track you. You could accidentally download a keylogger, all sorts of things. NordVPN gives the best security possible. It has a password manager which generates complex passwords, syncs across all your devices, stores your notes and credit card information. It also gives you 10 gigabytes of private cloud storage, secure files. It backs up your data automatically. But the main thing it gives you is peace of mind. It gives you peace of mind when you're out on the internet, when you're streaming, when you're playing games, when you're listening to podcasts like this one. It gives you safety anywhere at any time. It protects your online activity. You get full access to all content. And if you use the link go.nordvpn.net sh3ku, it'll take you to where you can get a great deal for a 1-month plan, a 2-year plan, a 1-year plan. They are our newest sponsor. We're happy to have them. And if you would like to sponsor something here at any of the podcasts on the Solitaire Rose Network, you can. Just email me, solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Thanks. Joe?
There's more.
No, it's time for retro reviews.
Oh, yay! What you got for us today?
And this time it's my turn.
Yay!
So I have the Best of DC Blue Ribbon Digest Superman #1. This was the first issue of the
I got it
DC
too.
Digest.
That's where he's flying in the.
It is a painted cover by Ross Andrew, Dick Giordano, and
Yes.
Joe Orlando.
Oh, this is going to be a read along.
So it was edited by Julie Schwartz. It came out in 1979. It was the first issue of the Digest. And while many of the stories are, they're all from the Mort Weisinger era, which really surprised me. Well, I take that back. The two main stories are from the Mort Weisinger era. The first one is Attack by the Army of Tomorrow. Oh, wait, no, that's a Julie Schwartz edited one.
Yeah.
And it seems to be set in the future, even though, as I was reading this, I couldn't understand if this was set in the future or not, because people are talking on video phones, but it's also very much modern, and people are dressing in 60s clothes, and this was done in the 70s. The gist of the story is that Morgan Edge, who now owns the Daily Planet, says that Perry White is a waste of money, and newspapers are a waste of money. It should all be TV. So Perry White goes out to find a story. As he does, he just stumbles onto two people who have superpowers.
Well, what it was is he was trying. I think he was talking with Clark. He's like, you can get a story about anything. This is the hottest day in the world. Look at those two people. They're wearing gloves. Let me go over and talk to them.
And they shoot him with their superpowers.
To which Perry believes he got punched, but Clark notices, because he's Superman. Did I just spoil something? They zapped him.
The gist of the story is that these are superpowered, basically they're superpowered people who've been brought back. And the reason they wear gloves is because that they don't have thumbs.
Yeah.
And the story is stretched out way longer than it should be, to the point where the army is hiding them and Superman gets captured and has to escape. And in the end, Perry White reports the story on the TV news that all of the people who have the powers that have been held by the army or whoever are mutants, and they're going to go to their own planet at the end.
And of course, Edge is all upset because why didn't you prepare an in-depth report? And Perry puffs on a cigar, blows it in his face, because I'm a newspaper, Edge. Full coverage isn't what television news is for. You can read the full story in tomorrow's Daily Planet.
We then get a story that I actually remember as a kid, where Superman's the sports reporter at the TV station Clark Kent's at is substituting for Johnny Carson. I'm sorry, Johnny Nevada.
Nevada, yeah.
We don't know why.
Don't want to get sued.
And we don't know why Johnny Nevada is not able to host the show, but Superman figures it out that Johnny Nevada has been kidnapped. We get all sorts of convoluted stuff so that the kidnappers shoot at Johnny Nevada so that Superman can hear the bullet being fired. He's faster than a speeding bullet. He goes and he captures the bullet before it hits Johnny Nevada.
Prove it.
Very much a Julie Schwartz story.
Oh yeah, and as a kid reading this, I absolutely loved it. I sucked it up. And if I were writing Superman, I would figure a way to redo this story without such, like you said, the convoluted plots.
We also get Superman Under the Red Sun, where Superman goes to the future where everybody has left Earth, and our sun has become a red sun, so he doesn't have any powers, so he has to figure out how to get back to normal time without his superpowers.
He does. We don't want people worrying.
There is also there's a story that I think was either real early in Mort Weisinger's tenure or right before, where a newspaper strip has been created about a new hero, and then that new hero shows up to be Devil Superman. Mental Man, the Eighth Wonder. And I swear, if you look at his costume, Joe, do you remember the joke in that issue of the Fantastic Four where it was Captain Ultra, whose costume was just a whole bunch of colors thrown together?
Yeah.
Mental Man's costume looks exactly like that. I like colors. But then we get one of the few Mort Weisinger stories, Mort Weisinger edited stories that I liked. And that is The Death of Superman. This is one of the few Mort Weisinger stories that is really, really good. Written by Jerry Siegel, creator of Superman, penciled by Curt Swan, inked by George Klein. This is about Superman, about Lex Luthor's plan to trick Superman into thinking he had become a hero, only to kill him, and then deal with what would the Earth do without Superman. It's a well done story. It really worked for the time. And Jerry Siegel was about 30 years after he'd been writing Superman. And the story is really good. Curt Swan's art does it now because it's a 60s Superman story. It's super compressed. There's a lot of pathos. The death of Superman itself is very much I'm dying, choke, gasp.
Choke.
But if you haven't read it before, it's a really good story, and it's probably one of the reasons why at the Superman summits back in the 90s, when they couldn't figure out what to do, Jerry Ordway would say, well, we could kill him. There are also a lot of 1- and 2-page spreads of here's the secret of Superman's clothes. They have a very famous strip from Plop where Lois Lane throws herself out a window and says, aha, I've proved Clark Kent is Superman. And then we see Clark Kent sitting at his desk and somebody says, what happened to Lois? Oh, she fell out the window. Letting us know that he probably just dropped her to save his secret identity. I imagine when this came out at the time, I would have really enjoyed this because I had not read a lot of Superman, and I thought this is 100 pages.
95 cents at the time.
Grab some good stories, and I think it was worth the money because it's a digest. There aren't any ads in it either. Did not have ads in their digests.
Yeah.
And instead, on the back cover, it was presenting the Man of Steel's 5 greatest challenges. So this was back at a time when there weren't trade paperbacks, and reprints were very much at DC, they would always say, reprinted by popular demand. And it was like, well, who's popular demand? Probably the people in the office are like, we don't want to commission a new story. If you can pick this up cheap, it's a fun read, but remember, it's digest size, so it's 6x9, so it's tiny. It's not as bad as the other digest where I'm trying to read George Perez, where he's like 18 panels on a page, and it's half size, but it's half size of a regular comic, so the reproduction's not going to be very good. Most of these stories are reprinted elsewhere in other books, but all in all, I give this a thumbs up. As a kid, I loved digests because even though they were smaller, you got more to read. And I always liked having more to read because I was very conscious of making my money go farther. It's like, okay, I can read this comic that's 17 pages, or I could get this digest, which is 128. I'll get the 128 pager because that's an entire day and a half of reading.
Yeah, same thing. I remember buying this off the newsstand. I bought almost all the digests for the same reason. I often talk about I have no idea how I became aware of Silver Age, Golden Age stories. I think a lot of it was because of this. And like I said, the one reason why I still have this copy, and I don't know if it's my original or just a reprint, is because of that story where Superman gets the bad guys to shoot the gun at the news guy, and that one-page panel where I just read it. It said, yes, Superman vanishes on his way out of the studio in a galaxy building, moving so fast, he's a blur no human eye could perceive. Moving so fast, the heat of air friction melts the Johnny Nevada mask he is wearing, while his super-sensitive hearing shuts out all other noise and concentrates the one sound he was expecting to hear, the very distinctive click of a Magnum 44 trigger mechanism, the sound Superman follows to its source as he proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, bursting through the building, catching the bullet, that Superman truly is faster than a speeding bullet. I mean, like I said, if I ever get to a point, and it won't happen, that I'd write a Superman story, I would figure out a way to redo this without, like you said, Cory, the convoluted, well, this is how this happens and blah, blah, blah. I enjoyed that one. I mean, your pick. That was good.
And now it's time for my favorite part of the show.
Oh, is this where we jump on the tracks, run away from trains, and say we're doing training?
No. It's not where I take the Bobby the Brain Heenan figure out of its packet and put the Weasel costume on my action figure of death. Cool. No, it's Freaking and Geeking. Joe, what are you freaking on?
Remember, I was all excited because Titan had that graphic novel coming out that called Mother Nature that Jamie Lee Curtis would actually be signing?
Yes.
Diamond canceled it. Not that it's canceled, but just like years ago when I wanted the actual signed reprint of the Overstreet Price Guide #1 replica signed by Overstreet himself, I didn't get one, and now they're like $300-400 on eBay. Oh yeah, they're all over eBay. So I did find one, a little bit more than I would have paid to Discount Comic Book Service, but I was a little freaking on that, and I guess I was happy I got it affordable, but I was kind of disgusted, like, why the fuck do I even bother ordering this shit? I like signed stuff, though. Another thing I'm freaking on are automatic upgrades. I don't know what the hell happened to my editing program that I use for photos and stuff as I'm doing eBay. Oh, man, I had to, relearn it. Everything gets moved around. Everything is changed. Instead of just getting the photo, I get a collage of photos. It's like, no, I wanted that photo. That's why I clicked on it. I mean, I don't have a lot of time to dick around trying to get stuff on the eBays, especially since I'm working not only to do that, but also to get ready to go to the Fall Con, October 28th. Pat and I will be there. So, I don't have time to relearn stuff. But in the meantime, I was able to figure it out. A couple hours I could have spent putting things up. But no, apparently these automatic upgrades think I've got nothing better to do than to relearn things. I'm an old person. I don't have time for this shit. Anyways, let me just take a quick look at the weather. Oh, hey, all the severe weather, Cory, well, the heavy weather's north of me. So unless something forms in the wee hours, we probably won't get much. I like my boom booms. Cory, what you freaking on?
First thing I am freaking on here at the All In event in England. All Elite Wrestling sold over 81,000 tickets. It's their biggest weekend ever. Huge success. Instead, all we heard about was that CM Punk and Jack Perry got into it backstage. It came to blows. CM Punk has been fired. Jack Perry has been indefinitely suspended. Once again, AEW shoots himself in the foot and takes what should have been their biggest week ever, and instead it becomes more backstage drama. Now, part of this is that we are in a new era where this sort of stuff, first off, is out immediately because everybody has cell phones, and also because I believe wrestling has finally become kind of like other workplaces. Joe and I were talking before the show. If this would have happened in 1999, and instead of Jack Perry and CM Punk, it was Al Snow and The Undertaker either would have dropped him backstage or requested a match with him so we could beat the hell out of him in the ring. And if it was back in Vern Gagne's day, and it was Nick Bockwinkel and some lower card talent, Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens, Billy Robinson, and Vern Gagne would have beat the shit out of him. I like CM Punk. I really do. I don't think he's happy in wrestling. There are people who, he's a cancer. He causes trouble backstage. He's well known to be kind of prickly. He's well known to get irritated with people who rub him the wrong way. And I think at AEW, there were some people who wanted to rub him the wrong way because it's like, oh, here's the new top dog. Well, because he's on top, I may not be on top anymore. I'm going to whisper to my friends in the press about, CM Punk is this and he's that and he's the other. And nobody in charge said, stop that. And it built 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 to this. I just wish, one, CM Punk could have come in, did his stuff, had a nice 3 to 5 year run, gone home. Instead, we get all this stupid drama. I'm not going to come down on either side because I think everybody involved was stupid. But it all boils down to management not stepping in when this started, saying, look, this ends now, or I'm going to start suspending people. He didn't do it, so it festered and it grew. Joe, have you looked at the comic prices for stuff last month and this month?
Yeah, that move to Marvel Unlimited is starting to look pretty good.
Marvel's books are moving to $4.99 very quietly. DC's collected editions have been stupidly overpriced for years, to the point where I look, it's 112 pages and it's $20. No, I won't pay that. It's another round of price increases, and while we'll all say, they have not really increased prices in comics for almost 20 years. This is the longest we've gone since the initial 10 cent that we've gone without a major price increase. It's still a bad idea. I think the comic package, the monthly comic package, is just priced out of existence at this point. $5 for a 22-page comic. I understand the economics. I understand why they have to do it. But that's just insane. It's just insane. And then the last thing I am freaking on, I did cover the wrestling event on Sunday night. One of my favorite characters in wrestling, Orange Cassidy, his entrance video is just, he took a Sharpie and wrote some stuff. So it's things like, put a cool move here. Or, writing that he's the AEW Atlantic and then crossing that out, international champion. But one of the things that popped up was, I'm so tired. I agree with him so much. Joe, are you like crinkling paper into the microphone?
I'm sorry, are you going to do freaking?
No, because I can't finish it because I can't hear myself over the crepe paper you're crumpling into your microphone.
I'm sorry, I'll mute, but I'll get to it when we get to the geeking.
So I counted up last month 30 articles for PW Insider, with 8 audios. I did 5 podcasts with Joe. I worked both of my jobs, although I did not work as much at the group home. Like Orange Cassidy, I'm so tired. 2 AEW pay-per-views in a row. That means I am sitting on the floor typing about wrestling for 5 hours. And I would, being a 59-year-old man, sitting on the floor for 5 hours, thank God I do DDP yoga, I'd still be sitting there. I have this weekend off from both jobs, and there's no big wrestling event. I think what's going to happen is I'm going to go to the sale at Hot Comics Friday night because they're $2 trades. I'm going to stop at the candy store on the way home. And then when I get home, I'm turning my phone off and turning my TV on and not doing anything but watch football, movies, and wrestling. I'm so tired. Joe, what are you geeking on?
Well, as you heard, I'm eating the return of the Hershey's DC superhero bars. And there's 12 of them to collect. And I say collect because not only are they limited edition, very delicious, but on the back, there's a QR code that unlocks exclusive stories. I don't know. I'm assuming the stories are connected because it says connect the stories. So you got to get all 12 in order to read the whole story. I just thought that was fun. Hey, you can have fun with your cereals. I have fun with my candy bars. I'm watching, I mentioned it last week, my wife and I started watching Welcome Back, Kotter. It's an American sitcom, started in 1975, went through 1979, starring comedian Gabe Kaplan as a high school teacher in charge of a radically and ethnically diverse remedial education class called the Sweat Hogs. It's recorded in front of a live audience. Most notable is because it provided John Travolta with his breakthrough role. I haven't watched these in ages. I do have little bits and pieces that I remember, but most of it I don't recall. And of course, I absolutely love Marcia Strassman, who plays his wife. And then, of course, Deborah Lee Scott, who shows up as a recurring role as Roselle Hotsy Totsy. Get it? Star Trek Lower Deck, 2 days away as we're recording it. So next week, Geeking, we'll have that on, and I'm so excited to see that. Cory, do you want to talk about the Bugaloos or Dan Curtis comics?
Oh, the Dan Curtis comics.
Oh, yeah. The Bugaloos, by the way, I was just going to mention, 4-issue series from Carlton from 1971, 1972. Insanely expensive and hard to find. Probably because they didn't have photos on the cover, and like anything TV related, there's a whole group of fans that are in love with anything Sid and Marty Krofft. So the reason I say that is because I found a cheap copy and I put it up for $20. It sold before I even got to the next book. So if you see any Bugaloo comics out there, you should grab them. Equally as rare, but not as expensive, are the aforementioned Dan Curtis comics. And what I'm talking about specifically are in 1974, Dan Curtis produced a set of 9 22-page miniature comics. They ran about 6 inches by 3 inches, or for you, those of you in the UK, 152 millimeter by 72 millimeter. These were intended to be sold with bubblegum bubbles, I guess. Now, for you kids who didn't grow up in the 70s, you're probably vaguely familiar with gumball machines. Basically, they were, you put a penny in, you get a gumball. They had these machines that were 25 cents, which were deluxe. Inside those, you would get cool toys. I remember once getting a Popeye record, which you had to take, glue onto a piece of cardboard, cut it out. Now, this thing's only about as big as, say, I don't know, it's probably like 2-3 inches across. And once you got it flat, then you put it on your mom and dad's brand new stereo and probably chew the needle up. I also remember the song for it, and it had about the same quality as that Miami Mice soundtrack we played years ago. I am Brutus. I am the rudest one of them all. Needless to say, Mom and Dad didn't give me a lot of quarters to do this. My guess is these comics were meant to go in those type of plastic gumball things. The closest thing you can think of every so often at Target, you'll see like plastic eggs. You put a prize inside them, seal them up. So, yeah, you had oodles of different gumball machines from penny to nickel, dime, and the quarters were the good ones. My guess is that's where these were supposed to go. I have never seen any of them damaged, because being damaged would be the ones that, obviously were circled up and put inside these little gumballs. They're usually flat. They're in newsprint, so they're not terribly impressive, but they're also from one of the Gold Key comics of that era. The set's been listed in Overstreet Comic Price Guide in their giveaway section as Dan Curtis reprints. And I've got it right here. They did Dark Shadows, which was the first one. Star Trek was done number 2 and number 6. Number 3 was The Twilight Zone. Number 4, Ripley, Believe It or Not. Number 5, Turok, Son of Stone, which came from, I guess, Turok number 78 at the time. Number 6 was Star Trek. Number 7, The Occult Files of Dr. Spectre. Number 8, Dagar the Invincible. Number 9, Grimm's Ghost Stories. They run anywhere from $2 beat up to, they shouldn't run over $10 to $20 for some of the better ones like Dark Shadow, Star Trek, even the Turok one. So now you know something, well, 2 new things. You know to look out for Bugaloo Comics cheap, and if you can find these Dan Curtis things, they're actually kind of fun. Last thing I'm geeking on is still selling stuff on eBay, and I'm doing a deep dig into my collection, trying to move out stuff, not only in preparation for FallCon, but also just, you kind of like, well, that aforementioned book we talked about, the Superman Digest, I will probably keep that until my eyes go and I can't read it anymore. But some of these other things I got, and I'm like, you know what? Time to move them on. For example, I sold a romantic story number 41 from 1958 from Carlton. That was about Very Good to Find. That was one of those, there were none on eBay. I put it up, sold right away. Elvira's Mistress of the Dark Wrath of Khan variant from 2022, published by Dynamite. Pretty funny. Cory, do you remember? Oh, I think I might have talked about it. Who was in DC Superstars number 11 from 1977?
I mentioned that was Zatanna with a beautiful Gray Morrow cover.
Yep. And I the one I had one that was in fair to good with a detached cover. Put it up. So I made an offer, sold it, because I have a better one. I reviewed briefly the Kiss Army of Darkness softcover that I read, sold it. I had a copy of the Ultimate Spider-Man 100 Project. That was from Heroes Initiative, where they send out all the covers and they have everybody do different covers on a blank sketch, and then they auction them off as they go across the country at different cons. Then they publish a book that has everything in it, as well as some blank pages, so you can go out and get some more creators to draw Ultimate Spider-Man if you want. In this case, I get the hardcover, and again, I'm downsizing. Sold a Black Orchid number 1 that was signed by Jill Thompson. I know you're going, what? Cory, or Joe, don't you collect signed books? And I go, yeah, I have this particular one. This was the Black Orchid from 1993 DC Vertigo, but the one I have is, I was able to get one that was signed not only by Jill Thompson, but by Dick Foreman, who wrote it. So, sorry, all with the old and with the new. That's what I do on the eBays. And of course, I haven't said it much because I don't really talk a lot about it in its own section, because I really dig the retro reviews. I'm still eBaying. So if you go there, KRAYZ, you see something you like, even if I haven't put up, make an offer, just let me know you listen to this here podcast, and I will I cut you a deal. Yeah, that's a ticket. As I always like to say, come get some. Cory, what you geeking on?
I went into the All Out pay-per-view on Sunday from All Elite Wrestling thinking that this was, they've done no build for this show. I don't care. These matches seem like leftovers. Because they've done a huge, it would be like if WWE had WrestleMania and then 7 days later did another pay-per-view. I was not looking forward to writing it up. And halfway through the show, I was like, this is one of the best pay-per-views they've ever had. It was very, each match was different. Everybody came in with this, and it really felt like that they had come into the show knowing that, you know, Tony Khan has announced that CM Punk not only is not going to be here, but he's been fired. We got to win these people over bad. Everybody went above and beyond to put on the best show they could, and I had so much fun watching it. They had comedy wrestling. They had big men slapping man meat. They had a women's match that was primarily mat-based wrestling. They had an all-out brawl with weapons, and Bryan Danielson had a strap match, which blew me away for how good it was. And then I found out afterward that Bryan Danielson, his arm isn't completely healed. He broke his arm a couple of months ago. It's still not completely healed, but he was like, well, you know, we got to give him something. I was amazed at how good that show was. And it made me happy that I didn't waste my time and money. Comic-wise, I've only been reading one comic, Joe.
Better be a damn good one.
It is. That's the Saladin Ahmed Spider-Man Omnibus. This is his run on the Ultimate Spider-Man, who I guess is just Spider-Man now. He captures the idea of a teenage boy, whereas Miles Morales feels like a teenage boy. It doesn't feel like what a grown-up thinks a teenage boy would be like, but more what a teenage boy is like. And I've really come to feel that the Miles Morales Spider-Man is very much Marvel's attempt to, you know, that early Spider-Man stuff by Lee and Ditko? We're going to do that, but we're not going to have him graduate high school in 3 years. We're going to keep him in high school to appeal to that audience. It's so well done. And the thing that I like the most about it are the little things. In the first story, Spider-Man is tracking down a lost kid. He runs into the Rhino. He thinks the Rhino's behind it, but no, Rhino is trying to track down a relative's lost child too. So they're going to team up and work together. Captain America shows up, and he, of course, is about to go after Rhino because they have history, and Rhino's about to go after him. And Miles says, no, we're working together. We're a team. And Cap basically says, all right, Miles, you've earned my trust. I'm gonna work with you on this. Does not even question Rhino for the rest of the story. What a cool way to kind of put over that Miles Morales is respected among the superhero community. And it's one of those moments where you go, oh, that is so cool. And then the last thing I am geeking on, I am 75% done with the George Romero novel, The Living Dead. This was a novel that was finished by another writer after he passed away, taking some short stories and some notes and a half-finished novel, kind of jamming them together. The way it's written feels very epic. The first half of the book is civilization collapsing, and we're following all of these different characters in different places. Some of them are dealing with what it's like to be in the city. There is one sequence that is probably the scariest thing I've read, where the zombie outbreak takes place on an aircraft carrier. And it goes into detail on how everything on the aircraft carrier falls apart. And I imagine there was a lot of research done on this, but as I'm reading it, it really gave me those vibes of Dawn of the Dead. The second half is set 15 years after civilization collapses. And while I don't agree with what they posit, it is Romero, and it's Romero's vision of what would happen, because the person who finished it said, these are all Romero's notes. So for those of you who think, no, that's not where he was going, no, this is absolutely where he was going. He throws in stuff from other Romero movies. He throws in a lot of stuff from unrealized Romero Living Dead movies, ones that didn't get made, where he takes the ideas from it and puts them in the book. This is very much a encapsulation of everything in Romero's Living Dead universe. At times, the prose can be a little purple, but I wonder how much of that is Romero, who never really worked in prose. He worked in movie scripts. And as much as I love George Romero, his dialogue was never great. So it's very clear that this writer kept a lot of what Romero wrote, but for me, I could tell when it's, oh, somebody smoothed out the dialogue and it was, okay, that's Romero's dialogue, because I know Romero's stuff so well. But it's a really well done book. And it's one of the few books that I could point to and go, this feels epic. This feels like a big story. It feels like a novel, in that there's a lot going on. There are a lot of subplots. There are a lot of characters, but the way it's written, it's easy to keep track of them and easy to understand who each of them are. And when we go from character to character, you don't get lost, which is hard for a lot of writers to do. I've read way too many fantasy novels where they try that and you get very lost. Oh, who are these people? Why haven't we heard from these people in over 300 pages? No, this is very smooth. It's very well put together. The plotting is fantastic. This is just a well-constructed book. Most of the writing is very well done. There are times when it really feels like you're reading a pulp from the 1920s, and that's not a compliment. But overall, I believe this book is now out in paperback. I cannot recommend The Living Dead enough if you are a fan of any of George Romero's movies, because he touches on all of them, including Martin, including Monkey Shines, and even Creepshow. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about funny books for an hour and a half.
Don't you have anything better to do? I'm sorry. Save it, pause it, because thank you.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
Cory, I have in my hand this piece of paper. Do you know why I bring it to a wrestling match?
Why is that?
Just in case The Rock is my opponent.
Ugh.
Hit my music.